end up pushing cars a lot. And man, I should keep an inhaler in the truck. Luckily it wasn't as bad as yesterday where my asthma was killing me the whole rest of the day. Hopefully, I guess we'll find out. Well, welcome back to the Roadside Rescue YouTube channel. I'm Ernest, and behind me is a 2008 𝕮𝖆𝖓𝖓𝖊𝑑. And probably the first thing that pops into your mind whenever you think of a 2001 to 2011 Subaru is the head gaskets. That's like the only motor I'm pulling for customers right now, because I can do these in a handful of hours. So let the machine shop take care of a lot of that work, and then I'll rebuild just the top end of that motor. I'm going to get the valves and everything taken care of at the machine shop, so as long as the short block isn't warped, we're going to reuse the short block. It hasn't been overheated, but it has mixed coolant with oil, so we're going to go ahead and pull the motor today. Should be pretty fun. If it takes me more than 4 hours, then I'm taking my time. Yeah, that looks like a milkshake to me. Not too bad though. It looks like it's got coolant sitting on top of the oil more than it mixed, but it definitely mixed a little. There you go. You can see that on my finger. Yeah, never mind. It definitely mixed just as much as there's some sitting on top. I just saw some streaks from the coolant on top. Well, no doubt about that. Good thing they didn't overheat it, because I think that short block will be reusable. Let's do it. All right, single overhead cam, that's a lot easier than double. So it should be nice and smooth today. Well, if you can see this, I'm pretty sure you can. Looks like the radiator's busted as well, so maybe it overheated once. Probably have to include a radiator in the replacement, but yeah, don't know anything about that. Wasn't even called here for that. Here's what I love about Subarus is the motor harness to disconnect it is just that one big clip. You can pull the motor once you do that pretty much. The weird little stuff, one big clip. So these are probably one of the easiest motors to pull. I've got to drain the fluids before I can pull it, which is still in a couple of hours, but I'm gonna go ahead and put some drain pans under there. That stuff's thick. Oh, super thick. Good thing I started now. That's gonna take a while to drain. That's a thick tube too. That's like the thickest you can get down in there usually. It's probably all that water in there, all the coolant, thickening it up. But yeah, better to drain that now than any other time. That's slow. That might be done by the time I'm pulling the motor. Alright, I actually had to fight with the alternator clip itself, the connector, for a long time. I say a long time, like 5-10 minutes. It didn't want to come out. I finally got it out by putting a pick down below it and pulling up. But that's kind of the story for most of the connectors on this motor. They were all pretty stuck. Like this, I guess. Does that you have to change the belt on that? I don't know. I can't remember. This lower hose is really glued on there. Almost got it though. Goodness. Finally. That was the most stuck hose I've had in a long time. Hard to get to also. Yeah, it definitely needs a new radiator. All right, I always forget about this bracket down here. It's so hard to get out. But I was just gonna jack everything up and get everything disconnected on the bottom at once. Probably should have done that because there was no need to get my hand that dirty right now. And I got the ground strap and these O2 sensors as well. So there's just the ground on that side, exhaust bolts, motor mounts, and then the transmission mounts on the bottom. And there's some wires over there and the bolts on top, and I think we're about ready to go. So I'll probably have this out in less than an hour for sure. And it's only been like an hour, hour and a half so far. Finally. Tough clip to unclip. Even harder when you can't see it. All right, we'll definitely replace this. All right, time for a break. Okay, absolutely everything is disconnected from the motor up here. That starter, the bolts for the starter go all the way through to the motor. So I'll take that out in a second. I've got it jacked up though. So I've got to get the exhaust bolts off. After that though, I got the transmission bolts and pull it out, and that's it. And these are nice. We've got just like 3 bolts, usually right up here. Looks like it's been leaking coolant for a minute, so some head gaskets have been leaking coolant. I noticed back here. Anyways, let's clean this up so I don't get drips in my eyeballs. And then just rip these exhaust bolts out real quick. The nuts on those studs. Shouldn't be too hard. I'll use the impact so it shouldn't strip out or anything. 17, I think. Ooh, 14. Okay, now when it comes to all the transmission bolts, you can actually reach them all from the top, which is what I usually do. Those are the ones you could see from down there. So that one, and that one, and then the same thing over there. There's 4, so do that, and then we'll set this back down and get the hoist on it. Watch the hood. Should be able to separate. I think the torque converter comes out with it. I can't remember how to take those bolts off, so I think I got to do that afterwards. I think I remember using a socket when I already had it out to do that. Alright, I'm gonna not to jack up the transmission too. Okay, well I haven't done anything about the torque converter because I was remembering when I saw these studs down here, the studs at the bottom of the transmission there, that the transmission, that makes the transmission have to slide out straight anyway, so shouldn't be a problem with the torque converter. You can see I've got a gap in there now, and that's how I make sure my dangler here is at the right angle. I'll go ahead and get a gap started and then adjust the angle so that that gap is pretty much even all the way across. Looks like it's a little bit bigger in the top right now, so I'll raise up the front just a little. And then it's pretty loose, so a pry bar should be able to get it out by now. Give it a wiggle and then we'll pry.
Alright, so now that I've got that taken out of the car and loaded up in my truck, I just took a little bit to clean up everything there. I'm going to come back and make a bit of a mess, so I'm not worried about like scrubbing up the concrete or anything yet. I just want to make sure I don't leave a huge mess. And everything's kind of organized. I got all my tools loaded back up with me, and obviously we're back at my house. And it's the same day. Normally I'll just tear down the heads the next day and take them to the machine shop, but I have so much time this afternoon that I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can tear down this whole thing. I think I can, but you know, it's going to take a couple of hours, 2 to 4 hours. Probably 2 hours honestly, but that's almost as long as it takes to pull the motor, so it's not like the day's over. That's pretty much just a quarter of the job, pulling the motor. But using some impact tools to help me, you'll run into issues trying to take the crank for the camshaft off, like the sprocket for that off, and a few other things like that. But using an impact can help out in those areas, and like you can see, I can tear this whole thing down while it's up in the air on a hoist.
All right, I was getting the head off and then I realized this clip is stuck to that bracket. So that bolt's just holding that. I'm gonna try and get that clip off. Okay, well, I'm just about cleaned up with everything. That's satisfying. I was able to do that all today. I was just thinking I would get the heads off tomorrow, but I got home so early. I was like, let me just go ahead and do it. We're gonna do the timing as well in water pump while I'm in there. So I'm just gonna set this motor somewhere dry under my carport, probably wrapped in a tarp, and it's gonna chill out for just a week or two, and I'll see you back then. I'll probably be shaving by then. I might even have a haircut because I'm going on a camping trip in a couple of weeks, and I've just been telling myself for months I would get a haircut, and I've given myself the deadline of that. So next time you see me, I'll probably look different. Okay, it's cold outside today, of course. Today I'm outside rebuilding the heads and the motor. So I'm blocked up in here with the heater, trying to make it a little warm. Got a workbench station going on over here. And I've got a bin full of degreaser right here. So I've got one set washing at a time, and I'm about to start. I'm not sure if I'm gonna clean another one or start reassembling. My hands are freezing. Cold because I was just washing up parts out here. I have a bin that I was just spraying stuff down and using to separate stuff, but basically that's just a good idea. Of had some stuff out here and some degreaser. Took one set inside, so I'm just keeping them separate. Then I have this tub of gasoline right here. It's a good solvent, because I'll show you after the degreaser there's still a bunch of gunk in there, so I need a better solvent to break all that down. And brake cleaner is expensive since I'm using a lot, just using like a gallon or so. I'm gonna use some gas. And it doesn't have to be spotless. There's still some gunk in there, but everything's nice and free moving now and clean, so I'll be able to get them all back up together.
All right, we've got the rooftop reassembly view here. You can see I've just got some floor mats put on top of my toolbox in the back of my truck. It's pretty cold outside, and I'm just gonna go through the process of making sure that everything's in the exact right place and clean, and putting these back together to their exact torque specs. You can see I have some sticky notes in front of me. Not all of those are the torque specs. Some of those are different notes, but I like to do that where I have the torque specs somewhere where it's right in front of where I'm working. I won't mess that up, and I'm always extra careful to make sure that I'm doing inch pounds or foot pounds. Had a bad experience with that when I was like 17 on like my second rebuild, if you know what I mean.
Okay, so this is the second head I'm putting together. The only hiccup I had was I forgot to put the seals in before I forma gasketed the cradle on. So I had to take that off and clean up all the forma gasket because I forgot to put the seal on. I got distracted though because I went to look at my wife's car, which had the check engine light come on. It's got the check engine light coming on for the transmission clutches. The torque converter clutch is not engaging, so I think I got a bad transmission. I just spent a week working on that. Pretty bummed about that, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do about it yet. They haven't even responded to my email. Okay, well, just the accessories on that now. Everything's worked out. Okay, well, it's the end of the day and I just pretty much got this motor built out. Oh man, a couple of things that could go wrong did. I forgot to get the dipstick in place first, but you can pull that out. I had everything timed and I was trying to tighten down the cam sprockets and I jumped timing on that, so I had to re-time it. I believe it's timed, so I went ahead and closed it all up because I could see each of the plug wires coming out from compression. There's no spark plugs in there, so I have to get spark plugs and then do these gaskets tomorrow, and that's it. All right, I think I've got everything I need with me loaded up to go do this motor install. The motor's back here too. There's the motor. I've got to stop by the auto parts store, get some spark plugs and some extra oil and a filter. I'm gonna do 2 oil changes because that oil was so nasty. Let's hit the road. Okay, I just got here and took off my sweater. Before I left at like 9 this morning, it was already like almost 50 degrees, so I was hoping it would be nice. It's gonna be a nice day. So I'm excited. I've got the motor right here built out. I think I'm gonna take the torque converter off and install that first, and then tighten the torque converter up once I get it installed. That's usually easier to install it that way, and it's usually easier to uninstall it. However, it's easiest to get to the torque converter, or if you have enough room to pull it out. Okay, let's get all this cleaned up and get going. This episode is sponsored by Oedro floor mats. It's got to be sponsored by Oedro. I've been using them all throughout this job. Look, here's the outline of one of those heads. I was even setting stuff on this box when I was cleaning it. Well, let's unbox these. These are for a Civic. I'm gonna go and try and give these to somebody with a Civic later. But let's go ahead and take a look at them. Oedro makes custom floor mats for all kinds of vehicles. And these are off-road duty, 4x4 duty floor mats. So these things are waterproof, mud-proof. These are meant to protect your car from pretty much everything. Oil, you name it. I use floor mats to reassemble things, keep them in a nice clean area, somewhere where I can work on top of a toolbox. Not only are these good floor mats for cars, they've got tons of uses. But they do great at their main purpose, which is protecting your car. Here's one for the trunk. So they're custom molded and 3D scanned to each vehicle. They're better than OEM floor mats because, one, they're not carpet, but they go up into all the turns and corners. Like I said, they're molded exactly to the shape of your floor. So you can keep the original carpet in your car. Perfect. So if you're interested in some floor mats, I would recommend Oedro. I've been using them for a while, and I've recommended them to a few of my customers. Check out the links in the description down below if you're interested for a special discount. Let's get back to this. All right, well, now that we're back here, you could see I already had that motor and everything pulled out. Well, that didn't happen by itself, so let's go ahead. You can see I've got the spark plugs there. That's the first thing I'm worried about. I had to hold that spark plug up for a good minute in order to get a good view of that in the time lapse. But I'm gonna pull out this hoist and just set it aside for a second, and then we'll get these spark plugs installed. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I had the thing timed well, but I didn't do a compression test. Since I was just hand cranking it anyways, I figured if I need to do a compression test at some point, I'll just do that once the starter's hooked up to it. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and try and install this with the torque converter, but there's a tube inside of the transmission that the torque converter has to be clipped into, and it's not really feasible to do that with the torque converter attached to the motor. I thought I'd give it a try because it was so easy, but after a second you can see I pull it right back out, and I'm going to take that torque converter off. And installing the torque converter by itself, it's already tricky, so it's usually just easier to do that by itself. And if you do have the torque converter in the transmission, then the motor will mount up to it pretty much flush. It's way easier. So anyways, that's all I was worried about there, was getting that torque converter
taken off. It's in there now, so let me tell you, this motor went in super easy. I did a transmission the other week that I thought mounted up pretty easy, but this made that look like nothing, man. This was a piece of cake. All right, and we'll get another good overhead view here. I've already, like I said, it went in so easy that it was mostly slid into place. So at this point, I'm just making sure that nothing is getting pinched, which, having done plenty of motors, I have plenty of experience pinching random wires and stuff. So there's just a lot of things I look for. I'm trying to go slow when I'm lowering things in. When I was younger, one time I jacked it up. I mentioned early in the video, watch out for the hood. On my personal truck, when I rebuilt the motor the first time, jacked it up too fast and dented my own hood. So there's just stuff like that that I'm trying to be careful and slow and meticulous with, that comes with experience, things that you learn to look out for. And you might be wondering now, well, before I even say that, that thing went in so easy. So to put in the torque converter in first is definitely the right way. I thought I would try and do it, but ain't no way. Anyways, that's how you do the torque converter bolts right there. And through that little gap, and my motor is sitting on my motor mount pins, so I don't want to put my fingers under anywhere where they can be pinched, but I do have the jack holding up the transmission, and they are bolted together pretty well, so it shouldn't fall because of that jack. And it's sitting on those studs, but those studs are on the edge of the hole, so that's what I'm saying, I don't trust that. Okay, I'm dead. That had to have taken over an hour to get the torque converter tightened up. Definitely the hardest part. I just dropped it back down, but man, that took forever. With nothing would fit on there, and look how dirty everything was, just covered in grease. So that was a nightmare. That should be the hardest part. I've got to get the exhaust now and just make sure the motor mount's dropped in place when I set it down. Yeah, that one's on that side. If they don't drop in by themselves, I found the easiest way is to get like a flat cold punch in between two of the threads and just knock it with a hammer. And it'll usually drop right in, and you can pull your chisel out. So that leaves now that motor and transmission nice and tight together. Hand tight, nice and hand tight. I'm going to tighten it up and get the accessories on, and should be out of here in 2 hours. Okay. Exhaust gaskets. And the exhaust manifold, I've got the nuts going on the motor mount already. Have to do both at the same time usually. And then that leaves like the ground over here and over there, pretty much the only two things left. Bust a move on that, get it in place. Okay. Find out what size this is. All right, now that we've gotten pretty much all that work done on the bottom there, I realized I forgot to do the motor mount bolts, the nuts on those, but I'll go down there and do that again later. And there's other things I have to do under there, like changing the oil and whatnot. Some of the transmission fluid came out whenever I took the torque converter out in the first place. So when I get it running, one of my concerns is making sure that I have plenty of oil in the transmission. So I've brought some high quality oil, transmission oil for Subarus with me. And now it's just a matter of getting all of these accessories back into place. Interestingly, when I took that initial belt off the first time, the belt that's closest to the motor, I remembered thinking, man, that's weird, it doesn't have a tensioner. I remember thinking that in the past as well. And right here, I forget to put that belt on before I put the AC compressor on. So I end up just running the belt on by hand, and I'm cranking the motor over and pushing the belt onto the pulleys all the way down. And that gets it seated up well, so I have no issues doing that. And we'll just go ahead to the next thing. Which we can't forget that it needs a new radiator as well. So at some point I'm going to step off to the side and switch over all those fans and stuff. That's going to add a little bit of extra work, but that's not the end of the day or anything. Just a little bit of extra work. And like I said, I count for that sort of stuff. I always give myself a window of hours instead of like some sort of, I think I'll do it in 3 hours. I give myself, it'll take probably 3 to 4.5 or 3 to 5. So if I run into a roadblock, no problem. Well, you'll hear at the end as well that there's a bit of noise, and I think that's just power steering noise. It got a little bit of air in it. I'm not sure if it already had air in it or if that was just from twisting the pump out of the way sideways, but I like to make sure that the pump and the AC compressor just get twisted out of the way rather than disconnected, because that causes a bunch more work you're going to have to do. And like I said, there's more things I had to do underneath the car, so let's crawl underneath there, get those motor mounts done. This thing's getting close to running. I just got to get the rest of these belts and accessories plugged in and bolted up. Well, anyways, I mentioned I was going to do 2 oil changes. I'm just going to use some cheap oil the first time and some of this. This is a nice solvent that'll help beat up a lot of that gunk that's in there I couldn't get to. So I'm going to let it run and warm up as long as it has oil pressure for 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then I'll do an oil change. And then I'll leave the oil that's in it. And I've already instructed the customer to get an oil change a couple of days of driving later, 4 or 5 days later. And then maybe 2 weeks after that, and then maybe a month after that, and then start doing normal ones. I told him as much as he's comfortable with, 4 to 5 is going to help get all that gunk out of there. 3, kind of a minimum. Well, when I was gone, the hose clamp for the fuel line fell apart. Luckily, I found both pieces. I don't know how. I just saw them both while I was working and recognized what it was. So I've got the fuel line, that crankcase ventilation hose right here, and the battery, and also the transmission fluid. Okay, I just hooked up the battery. I think I have everything in place. It should start. Okay, it looks like it's a bad battery. Let's put a jump box on it and see what happens.
set that timing on. Nice and warm. I'll be satisfied leaving the car with this second batch of fresh oil for a couple of days. I still want them to change it, because I think this is gonna be nasty. Let's get a good look. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh my. Oh, that was scary. Nice. Get all that out of there. Dang, that was sketchy. Okay, just got it topped off with some nice oil and an OEM filter. This is good for a couple of days. It's gonna need another oil change. I forgot to plug the O2 sensors in, so I just did that and reset those codes. And let's run it again, make sure nothing else pops up. But I think that's it. Well, there you go. I didn't realize I didn't film an outro that day. That's the story of how I replaced that Subaru's head gaskets. Like I said, I'll do Subaru head gaskets once or twice a year. Because I can pull the motor by myself, and I know I can do it in less than a day, even if there's a couple of issues like you saw. Putting those torque converter bolts back in. I'm sure they make a special tool, and I wanted to mention that you should look for that special tool if you plan on doing this job yourself, and go save yourself that hour. I spent more than an hour underneath there trying to tighten up 4 bolts on the torque converter. Like I said, they were covered in grease. That didn't help, and I'm sure I didn't have a special tool for it. Well, if you like this video, make sure you're subscribed, and you have to leave this video a thumbs up. You can check out the next video right up here. YouTube thinks you're going to love this one. I'll see you there, and if you want to help me take my wife to dinner, you can donate at the links in the description. Thanks for watching. That's a job well done. I'll see you on the next episode.